In the year 636 AD, the world stood at the crossroads. For 4 centuries, the Sassanid Persian Empire had regained as a global superpower. A mountain of iron with a culture stretching from Egypt to the borders of China, its kings commanded armies of armored war elephants, its engineers built canals that fed millions, and its courts dazzled visitors with gold and silk. But a new power was rising from the deserts of Arabia. Driven by a revolutionary faith and led by the companions of the Prophet Muhammad, the Rashidun Caliphate was about to take on the most formidable empire of the ancient world. What followed would reshape the Middle East, transform two civilizations, and echo through history for 14 years. This is the story of the Muslim conquest of Persia. To understand how a lightly armed desert force defeated a superpower, we have to look inside the Sassanid court. Years of exhausting wars with the Byzantine Empire had drained the Persian treasury and thinned their ranks. The two empires had been locked in conflict for decades, bleeding each other dry in a context that neither could afford to finish. Following the execution of Khusro II, the empire spiraled into a bloody civil war with over 14 different rulers, including two queens, vying for the throne in just 4 years. By the time an 8-year-old Yazdijerd III was finally crowned in 632 AD, the central authority had effectively collapsed into the hands of competing generals. The army that had once terrified Rome was now fragmented, demoralized, and leaderless. Caliph Umar appointed Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, a revered companion of the Prophet ﷺ, and a veteran of Islam's earliest battles, to lead the campaign. Sa'd was not a reckless commander. He understood that a war against Persia demanded patience, logistics, and above all, the right moment. Before the swords were drawn, a legendary meeting took place. A simple Muslim envoy, Ribi ibn Amir, entered the lavish court of the Persian general Rustam. Rustam sat on a gilded throne surrounded by jewels and silk. His generals arrayed behind him in their finest armor, but Ribi walked in wearing coarse wool, using his spear to pop the expensive cushions as he moved. An act of deliberate theatrical defiance. When asked why they had come, Ribi declared, "We have come to restore the worship of the Creator instead of the created." The room fell silent. Here was a man utterly unmoved by Persian power and Persian wealth. The terms were simply embrace Islam, pay the jizya tax, or face the sword. Rustam dismissed the envoy. He had made his choice. Rustam chose war. The two armies met on flat plains of Al-Qadsiya, a landscape offering nowhere to hide and no advantage to either side. The Persians brought an estimated 40,000 men and 33 war elephants. The tanks of the 7th century facing roughly 30,000 Muslim troops, the odds were daunting, but Saad, suffering from painful boils and unable to ride, commanded from a rooftop overlooking the battlefield, watching every move, directing every response. Day 1, the day of disorder. The Persian war elephants caused chaos, terrifying the Muslims' horses and nearly breaking the right wing. No cavalry in the world had been trained to face these creatures, and for a time the Muslim lines buckled. Day 2, the day of succor. Muslim reinforcement arrived from Syria. Commander Al-Kaka had his men enter in small groups throughout the day, creating an illusion of never-ending tide of fresh warriors. The psychological effect on the exhausted Persians was devastating. Day 3, the day of hardship. The fighting was brutal and unrelenting. Muslim warriors learned to target the elephants' trunks and eyes, blinding the leading beasts and driving them crashing back through the Persian ranks into the river. With their greatest weapons turned against them, the Persian formation began to fracture. Day 4, the final strike. The massive sandstorm blew directly into the faces of the Persians. In the chaos, the Muslims broke through the center. A warrior named Hilal bin Ulfa found and slew Rustam. When the Persian royal standard, Terafish Kaviani, fell, the empire's hope died with it. With Rustam dead, the road to the capital, Ctesiphon, lay open. Ctesiphon was one of the largest cities on earth, a metropolis of palaces, markets, and royal archives that has stood for centuries as the beating heart of Persian civilization. But one obstacle remained: the flooding Tigris River. The Persians had destroyed every bridge and taken every boat. Confident the swollen current would stop any army, in a move that stunned defenders, Saad ordered his cavalry to plunge their horses directly into the raging current, swimming across in pairs, horses screaming, soldiers gripping their weapons above the waterline. They made it across. The Persians called it the work of jinns. Yazdegerd III fled, leaving behind the legendary White Palace and treasures so vast that every soldier received 12,000 dirhams in booty. Though their capital had fallen, the Persians were not finished. Yazdegerd railed the remaining Sassanid forces on the Iranian plateau, sending word across the empire. Make one last stand. They gathered their remaining veteran forces, estimated by modern historians at between 30,000 and 50,000 men, at the mountain stronghold of Nahavand in 642 AD and fortified their positions. The terrain favored the defenders, and the Persians believed they could hold. The Muslims, under a command of Numan ibn Qarin, utilized a brilliant ruse, feigning a retreat to draw the Persians out from behind their walls and into the open. Numan was killed in the fighting, but his men held that line. The resulting slaughter was so absolute that the Muslims called it Fatah ul-Fatah, the victory of victories. Organized Sassanid resistance ended here. By 651 AD, Yazdegerd III was dead, murdered by a common miller while in hiding. The 400-year-old Sassanid Empire was gone, but its people were not erased. Over the centuries that followed, the Persian people embraced Islam while preserving their language, their poetry, and their culture. The mountain of iron had fallen, and a new era of world history had begun.